We might see a little film embedded in this on how they discovered, the person that discovered the Archaea bacteria. It's kind of interesting. All right, so we're going to get started here. So bacteria, what do we have to write on here? You don't have to write anything. The thing I would highlight is the fact that it's in the domain bacteria. So the thing that I would highlight is the fact that it's in the domain bacteria. I would also highlight that they have a cell wall. That's one of the telling characteristics of these things, is the fact that they do have a cell wall. Archaea, you have to write it, but let's shorten this baby up. I would say that they're in the domain, let me highlight, or underline, I can't highlight, but let me underline what you need here. I would say that they are in the domain Archaea, okay? I would say that they have differences in their gene and in the makeup of the cell wall. That's what I would say. That they have differences in the genes, in their genetic material, and in the makeup of their cell wall. And because of that, we've got a different kingdom, we've got a different domain. And you'll see the man that discovered that in the 1970s, and it took a while, and then they finally decided, okay, let's divide them up. On your test, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to ask you the 3 domains. If you say Archaea or Archae, that's fine. If you say bacteria, that would be fine. If you say eukarya or eukaryote, I will take that too. So just be aware of that. All right, eukaryote. Do you have anything to write on here? Because I can't remember. Okay, so for the eukaryote, I would say what the domain is. I would highlight that portion of it. And I would also highlight the fact that they have an enclosed nucleus. So I would highlight that they are in the eukarya domain and they have an enclosed nucleus. That's what I would highlight. 4 out of 6 kingdoms are this. So when in doubt, pick a eukaryote or pick eukarya if you have a doubt on it. But for Pete's sake, think of it, Archaea. If I ask you Archaea, what's the domain? It's Archaea. If I ask you bacteria, what's the domain? It's bacteria. They named them for their kingdoms. Okay, so Linnaeus only had 2 kingdoms. I want you to highlight those 2 that he had. He had the plant and the animal kingdom. So he had both the plant and the animal. Now, why would he only have the plant and animal? Yeah, that's all he could see. You know, they're multicellular, so that's the only things that he could see. That was in the 1750s. He didn't have access to a microscope. He didn't know about DNA, none of that stuff. Now, because we've got microscopes, we've got access to DNA, we can study it. Now, we've got much more complex classification, and it just keeps on getting more and more complex. Glad I'm not doing it. you a specific question. So some have had to be reclassified. I think when I was growing up, and I was in bio, I believe sponges at that time were classified as plants. I could be wrong, but I think they were. Why? They don't move. They're sessile. That's why. And then they looked at them underneath the microscope. They looked at those cells and they said, hey, wait a minute. They don't have a cell wall. And they don't have any chloroplasts. Well, they reclassified them as animals. So as the plankton moves through, they absorb it. So I'm going to ask you about sponges. Used to be classified as plants. They are reclassified as animals. So just be aware of that. In the 1800s, probably middle 1800s, they added the kingdom Protista. That literally means like first animal or before animals. So they looked at pond water and saw all of this little stuff swimming around and said, oh, wait a minute here. We've got protists, or we've got little animal-like things, and they didn't know what to name them, so they named them protists. Up there is an example of an amoeba. And then they started to notice differences between prokaryote and eukaryote. And that would have been the late 1800s, early 1900s. They had discovered TB was, I'm just thinking of that, that's tuberculosis. They discovered what caused it in the 1900s, something that they didn't know about earlier, which was bacteria, but they didn't know how to get rid of it. They didn't have any antibiotics at that point. So they discovered bacteria late 1800s, early 1900s, and they named it Monera. Highlight that because I will ask you that. So when I first started teaching, we had 5 kingdoms. Monera was still being used. So by 1950, you've got 5 kingdoms: fungi, plant, animal, Monera, and protists. So you've got 5 kingdoms. And that's the way it stayed until the late 90s, early 2000s, really. I remember I would teach Kingdom Monera, and I would teach there were 2 groups in that kingdom, Eubacteria and the Archaea bacteria. But they did not separate them into 2 different kingdoms until the late 90s. I would highlight that number 1, that the Kingdom Monera was split into the Eubacteria, which means true bacteria, and into the Archaea bacteria or the Archae bacteria. So it got split. So Eubacteria, what does that mean? Something bacteria.
True bacteria.
Yes, it does. This is the bacteria that you come in contact with every single day. This is the bacteria that's part of your flora and fauna of your body and of your skin. Okay? So the Archaea bacteria you are not coming in contact with. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So all organisms are divided into 3 different domains. Highlight that. Bacteria, Archaea, Eukarya. 3 different domains. Archaea, bacteria, Eukarya. So here are your 3 domains. So how do they separate in their classification? How do they separate this stuff? Number 1, it's the cell type. No, first and foremost, is it a prokaryote or is it a eukaryote? Cell type. Next one, cell walls. Do they have them or not? Are they absent or are they present? Animals are the only ones that have no cell wall. Any animal that you come in contact with, whether it's an insect or, whatever you can think of, doesn't have a cell wall. Plants all have cell walls. Bacteria all have cell walls. Archaea all have cell walls. Fungi have cell walls. Protists can either have a cell wall, yes or no, depending on if they're animal-like or depending on if they're plant and fungi-like. Body type, are they one cell, unicellular, or multicellular? Plants and animals are both multicellular. Protists can be both. Bacteria and archaea are unicellular. Fungi, I believe, can be both as well. For the most part, they're multicellular with the molds and the mushrooms and things like that. Nutrition, are they an autotroph or heterotroph? And then how do they metabolize their food? So like with autotrophs, you can have a few different types of autotrophs. Chemoautotroph, you can have photoautotroph. So that would be included on how are they making their food and then finally metabolizing their food. Heterotroph, how do they get their nutrients? Sorry. So, like animals, they have chromosomes. So that's how they would express through alleles and genotypes and things of that nature. Plants have chromosomes too, but the kingdoms, as far as their genetic expression, would be similar, like with chromosomes or what have you. You're going to have different ones. You're going to have different amounts of them. All right, so the first thing is bacteria. Please add kingdom to that, behind that. So that's our first kingdom. They are prokaryotes. I would highlight that. And I would highlight that they have cell walls, or what we call exterior walls. This is how we can get rid of them. Because with an antibiotic, you destroy their cell wall. Animals have no cell walls. We're considered part of the animal kingdom. We do not have cell walls. So that's why it's not going to hurt us. So you've got different bacteria shapes. Spirilla, bacilli is your rod, cocci is your round. And that's how they're named, too. When they talk about the strains of bacteria, this is the way that they get named, partly. They do have a cell membrane, and it's the same as what our cell membrane is. So we can't destroy the cell membrane. We have to get the wall of it. And internal compartments, that just means they have no organelles to speak of. They do have ribosomes, but they don't have any other organelles. Classified by shape, their cell walls at gram-positive or gram-negative. How do they get their nutrients? Are they parasites, heterotrophs, Autotrophs, how are they getting that? How do they metabolize? Are they a photoautotroph, chemotroph? I would highlight that they're most abundant organism on Earth. They're found everywhere. Found in every environment that you could think of. All right, next one's the Archaea kingdom.
You have a smart board.
Yeah, well, I must have been on a smart board. We must have had to move. Maybe it was like, I don't know. Sometimes I had to move, so. And I don't know how to get that out of there. You could see that my writing skills on the smart board would not be the best. But look. So they have a unique cell wall that's different than a bacteria. And they're like the bridge, they're like in between a eukaryote and a bacteria, a prokaryote. So they share some characteristics, don't share others with prokaryotes, share some with eukaryotes and don't share others. So here's your example. I don't know what these would be, if they're halophils, methogens. And we'll come back to that Archaea video. All right, so where are they found at? They're found in salt lakes. I used to have to know this, but I just said, well, they're known as the halophils. Halo, H-A-L-O, means salt. Phil means to love, so they are salt-loving. Deep ocean, thermoacidophils. And in hot springs, those are also would be the thermoacidophils, or at the very least, the acidophils. So they love heat and acid. Collectively, they are known as the extremophils. They love extreme environments. So, where do they live? They live like in Old Faithful, that geyser. They live in any of those hot springs around there. They live in volcanoes. So like the volcano that's erupting in Hawaii.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. And I don't know if I ever, well, I guess we're not on our plate tectonics or anything, but when I was in Hawaii, we went to Hilo, they don't take, the insurance they take out is volcano insurance. That's the insurance they take out. It's not getting Hilo, I don't think. It's getting, but it's on the Big Island. And that had been dormant for a while, where even it had not been erupting at all. And then when we got there, this was several years ago, it had started erupting again, but it was a very gentle, and I don't know if this is the same volcano, I'm assuming it is. It was a very gentle eruption where it would just bring the lava straight down into the ocean. And it was actually quite pretty, like you could see it at night. You take a helicopter ride, or we were on a little ship, and at night you can see it. They get as close as they can, but you can't get too close because it's sulfur. It actually takes your breath away. And so a volcano there, that was still an active volcano. The one that's in Honolulu, whatever island that was, O-A-H-U. That's island, that is now done. They have the big crater, that's done. Yeah, I can't pronounce that word. That's done. But the big island of Hawaii, it's a big island, it's still forming. And on one side where that Hilo is, on that city, on one side it's not very pretty because that's the Volcano National Park, because it's still forming and you don't have any plants hardly or anything with it. All right, methogens are in your oxygen-free environments. So, that would be, they're in the stomach of cows. That helps them to digest. They're in the stomach of termites. That's how they can digest their wood.
Stupid termite.
Yeah. So, that's how they digest their wood and things like that. So they're in those oxygen-free environments. I'm gonna head back and we're gonna see this, quickly. And then I'll talk about that shark dichotomous key a little bit. Ooh. If someone would get the lights, this will come on immediately.
More than a century after the discovery of the cell nucleus, it was believed there were two fundamental types of life on Earth: bacteria and everything else. Bacteria were classified as prokaryotes. These were simple, single-celled organisms with their DNA contained not within a nucleus, but by the cell wall. All other life forms were classified as eukaryotes. Their cells carried their DNA enclosed within the nucleus. But this simple classification system was in for a shock. In 1977, biologist Carl Woese was studying the genetic makeup of a methane-producing microbe when he realized it was different from any known bacterium. Its cell wall was unique. It produced unusual enzymes, and its genetic sequence was unlike anything he'd ever seen.
It became soon apparent within the space of an hour that there was something, a third thing out there.
This was the moment of discovery. Carl Woese had found a third form of life, a group of single-celled organisms that he called Archaea.
We used to think there were two primary kingdoms on this planet. Now we know there are three. That was the shift, big shift. Because all of microbiology had been structured around the idea that all bacteria are fundamentally the same. Not in their details, but in their essence, their ancestry, and their basic cell organization. Here is something that every microbiologist and biologist firmly believed in, and it wasn't true. So it does make you smile, doesn't it? Yeah. Look what I found.
What he found was a life form able to live anywhere on the planet, including the most extreme environments. Some Archaea even called this home, hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. Temperatures here fluctuate wildly within just a few inches, going from freezing to a scorching 760 degrees Fahrenheit. Archaea have also been found living miles inside the Earth, thriving in lakes of acid where even iron minerals dissolve. Today, some biologists believe that Archaea are the common ancestor from which eukaryotes evolved, and that includes you and me. For Carl Woese, the discovery of Archaea remains a sweet memory.
It was picked up when published by the New York Times first and the other newspapers, and then the TV came in. And I can remember walking outside of my house one night saying, when all this was happening, saying, "Tonight the world belongs to you."
Okay, somebody get the lights and then get out your shark dichotomous key. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to show you a little bit if you had trouble with the back, and then I will collect it.